This is not my beautiful wife. Recording in progress. Let me say that it's okay. I agree to be recorded. It was, I think, on occasion of Craig Gasson's wedding. Craig and Tanya. Were you there for that?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
And I think, we hung out just like I saw you at the wedding, and then maybe there was some social thing afterward or something. And I remember you gave me some valuable input on some work that I've been doing and all that stuff. So, I clearly remember
that was really arrogant of me.
Oh no, it was good. I probably asked for it, but yeah, no, it's good to see you again. And just because I think I might have only met you on that one occasion, I've wondered. It's like, okay, so I do remember the right person, and until you showed up, I was like not 100% positive that the Lonnie that I remember is the real Lonnie, but now I know. You're the real you. That's good.
Yep, this is real me. Yep. It's good to see you again, Stefano.
So Lonnie is a cartoonist. We are all cartoonists. Lonnie is a cartoonist, most recently doing a strip called Delineate.
When I broke up with my girlfriend and was heartbroken, many of my friends told me to use that time to find myself. I found out I don't like being alone.
You do 2 a week? 1 a week?
Well, it depends. There's a lot of life changes, but I actually try to hit 3 when I'm being good. I hit 3 a week, but yeah, sometimes I party too hard on the weekends, and then I don't get the Monday one done. Yeah, but yeah, ideally 3, but more lately it's averaging probably 2.
Yeah, Scorpio and I are nodding like, oh yeah, we know what that's like, but we don't party.
My last real huge partying was probably at one of your parties, Lonnie, like over a decade ago.
Oh, well, I'm flattered.
That was the last time I threw up after drinking too much.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking with my old friend Jeff Hassink, who is also a cartoonist, and I was relating to him. But the only time I threw up at a party was when he turned 18 ages ago, and yeah, I decided I didn't like parties.
Yeah,
Doesn't feel good.
I think I'm a rarity of cartoonists in that, like, I'm an extrovert, basically. So
yeah,
I don't think that's a common trait among many of us.
Not very common, no. Yeah, but it's a good thing. It's it's fun to hear about. It's good.
Yeah. No, I have no complaints about it. Well, I mean, I do, but we don't have to get into that.
No, let's do some therapy, really.
Right. There was something I was thinking about last night that, like, I was out last night, and I was drinking and talking with this woman, and people generally get shocked at both my memory and attention to detail. And I think this is, I mean, I'm sure you guys have experienced this, and I was thinking this is probably a trait of being, an artist, right? Like we don't, I think to some degree, many people have kind of blinders on because, there's a lot of stuff to do in life, and, you're thinking of all the things that you need to do. But I think as our job is like, oh, look at the Victorian design on that door, or, or that person, is wearing this type of thing, or, we're paying attention to language and all that stuff. And just kind of like we're more data collectors in our brain, right? Like, I think than the average probably person.
Well, that's what I think defines your ability to draw, is how well you can recall things. It's not necessarily your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think even if you had a jittery hand, but you had a really good attention to detail and you could recall things, you could still be a pretty good artist.
Yeah, I mean, and I do have a bit of a jittery hand, so.
So I think about if I started drawing like this, I think my my substrate, my piece of paper, whatever, would just have to become larger, so
Mm.
that on a larger surface, the jitter isn't as noticeable.
But I mean, do you guys come across that sometimes where people get kind of freaked out? They're like, "Oh, you remember that?" Or like, "Oh, I don't," they're like, "I don't remember that at all," or
Oh yeah, I mean,
where we were at, or any number of those things of just like, yeah, replaying.
I remember dates. I can remember something in relation to like what movie was out, what I was into.
Mhm.
What There's always all these associations going on.
And, I've also heard that, people being surprised that I could remember sequence of events in particular. I don't think I'm particularly good at remembering clothing. Like I don't
Mhm.
register that. Architecture more so, I figure that there's so much that goes into drawing in particular and being creative in general. But probably it's kind of like, I presume we all grew up reading superhero comics. You can have different variations of quote unquote superpower. And, it sounds like you've got this, very developed things for certain types of visual input. And, Scorpio and I might have something different, but along the same lines. As with superheroes, there's a tendency, towards pride, let's say. It's like, oh, wow, look, I can flame on and fly through the sky. I think that really there's a way to flip that around and think of ourselves as having this kind of handicap that forces us to do what we do. In the same way that, like, my superhero was Spider-Man coming up. It was just, that's the one that I really latched onto. Spider-Man has all these amazing powers and capabilities and can therefore stretch out and do all of these things that no one else can do. But if you look at Spider-Man's day to day, which, Stanley and Tim Ditko did a fair amount,
Yeah, yeah,
he's also handicapped. There's so many things that he can't do, either because he doesn't have the time or because he doesn't have the skill set, right?
yeah.
Whereas the non-superpowered people that he lives around are able to actually exist in the sort of, maybe a shared social space or things like that, where they don't have to run off and get the isotope to save Aunt May or whatever, right? So it's almost like it's a unique version of what everybody has, which is we all have our own issues, we all have our own problems, we all have our ailing relatives or lack of ailing relatives, or superpower to not grow old and all of that stuff. And talking about you, of course, Lonnie. But in the end, it's what do we do with what we have, and figuring out what's best for us to do with what we have. That's part of a creative. That's part of the creative effort too. And I'm trying to kind of pivot us into talking about the Superman stories that we read, but I can't quite find the access point.
Lonnie's the access point.
Lonnie is the access point. Okay, great.
Quick side note though, about Spider-Man is that the one thing is as a kid, I was really confused by Norman Osborn's hairstyle.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's a very dated hairstyle that, well, by the
I
time
was,
we were kids, nobody wore their hair like that.
did anybody ever wear that hair? Was it a 1920s thing? What was
I think
that?
it was a 50s thing. I think it was a 50s.
50s thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
but
I've
yeah,
seen
that's
pictures of like people with kind of like they have curly hair, but they're trying to press it and they slick it back.
okay.
Yeah, I'm
That
not
that
sure.
like I that that's an interesting bit of information. I can see that. You're totally right. I just accepted it as like this weird artistic quirk. But no, there is a real life counterpart. I'm gonna have to, look at some old photos now. That's
Yeah.
cool.
And what's
Yeah,
weird is that
amazing.
Mike Diodato, when he was doing Dark Avengers about
Right,
15 years ago, he was drawing Tommy Lee Jones as Norman
right.
Osborn, but he was giving him the Norman Osborn haircut.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Nice. I think Spider-Man's probably a good pivot. I think like there's definitely like parallels of Spider-Man to Superman. I mean, they're both like kind of the respective Marvel DC Marvel anchors, right? They're like
Yeah.
the biggest one.
You could argue that Batman has become a bigger anchor for DC, but by the same token, X-Men and Avengers, so I see what you're saying. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah. I mean, I think maybe definitely probably, in the more recent years financially, but I think iconically, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Superman is, yeah.
yeah. And they're both, although I mean, I think with the new movie, they've kind of become like kind of lean more with the Spider-Man, but they're both
You mean
do good.
Superman?
Yeah. But yeah, the difference is like, yeah, of course, like the Lee Ditko trying to make him have very human problems, and of course, like the Superman being more godlike. But I mean, so many of those stories are Superman also having like lady problems or any number of like domestic issues, right? Especially
Yeah, and
like,
the ones that Scorpio signed for homework, very much go
yeah.
into that. Scorpio, can you tell us why you asked us to read Superman number 141 and For the Man Who Has Everything?
Yes. So a lot of times when I'm eating breakfast, I don't really feel like reading a comic. I just like scanning through them because I have thousands of comics digitally. So I just look for funny panels. I just enjoy the goofiness of a lot of Silver Age stuff. So I was scanning through an old Superman comic, 141, and I
Mhm.
noticed that there are 7 panels of Superman in a really tight embrace with that woman, Lila Larrell, an emotion actress on Krypton, before he was born, and she knew his parents. I doubt that there's any other Superman comic out there that has 7 panels of Superman kissing anybody. And
That's
Wow.
something that you would notice. That's good.
That rings true because that's funny because I did read that issue, and it's almost like Superman got permission to be romantic because, right, like the big tension is always will they or won't they in those Silver Age, and it's always won't, but
Yeah.
with Lois Lane and Superman.
and he has no powers on Krypton.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we should say basically what happens
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, you should probably do a quick plot
is
outline.
that Superman goes too fast when he's flying through space. Goes, oops, found myself in the past, and he just happened to find himself right back when Krypton was right about to explode. Seems like. Um, so one has to wonder if he subconsciously knew, you
Or
know.
it's like a few months before,
Yeah,
right?
but still,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty
yeah,
close.
yeah.
Like if you can go back in time anytime and you just happen to find yourself
Yeah.
back in the space-time area of your dead planet when your parents were alive. So he goes back in time, finds out that Krypton's still there. He sees his parents are still alive. It's funny, he shows up on the planet and there's a science fiction movie being made, and he's said to be wearing a spaceman outfit. I think Jor-El says, why are you wearing such a funny outfit? And everyone on Krypton wears that funny outfit. I think the only funny thing about it is that he's wearing a cape.
Mm-hmm.
But it's such a tragic issue. One, he meets his parents and hangs out with them, loses them, and then he also finds the love of his life, seems like, then loses her at the end.
Yeah. It was do you know who it was written? It was drawn by Wayne Boring, the insides, right? And the cover was done by Kurt Swan, I believe.
That looks like Wayne Boring.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
insides were definitely drawn by Wayne
Yeah.
Boring. I recognize
Jerry Siegel wrote it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you guys think about it overall? What was your
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, I mean, it was great. It definitely had that Silver Age goofiness. It was a, kind of a melancholic story, which is right up my alley. It also touches on I kind of an idea that I hold, and it's like some people have friction with this because it's like, oh, so you believe in fate, right? I think we've discussed this a little bit, but my suspicion is that the past is similar to the future. It like if it could be flattened out as a like a two-dimensional thing, right? You could just look at it like a painting of a
Yeah.
timeline. So, like everything that ever was and ever will be is already done. And so going back to that,
is that the block called a block universe?
yeah.
Is
So
that
going
it?
back to that Superman, I love that he is trying to change all these events and then they happen anyways. Like 12 Monkeys is one of the best. I love those type of time travel stories where you're trying to do all these things to change the future, but they were always part of what was, going to happen, and there's like a beautiful like symmetry to that. And like I said, it kind of lines up with how I believe time actually is.
So like Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That I think way too much, which Dr. Manhattan was basically the Superman of Watchmen, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, different personality, but I see that. I also think that our relationship to the past is different than our relationship to the future, but that doesn't mean that past and future are not essentially two parts of the same whole. What's interesting about the notion of this kind of immutability that seems to go along with that is our perceptions are limited inherently. Any creatures, any beings' perceptions are limited. So I feel like it's possible to experience this cube thing that you guys were talking about, the totality of what is in the past, present, future throughout the cosmos from so many different points of view that it's that our common experience would be that even when we're back in the same place, if we see exactly the same thing, it's just because we're exactly in the same place that we've seen it from before. But it may be possible to see the exact same thing from a different angle, so to speak, which is what to some extent might give meaning to our existence, because if our cognition allows us to sort of notice different things about reality as we're going through it. If we have some sort of pivot, the way that our necks and our eyes can move cognitively, that allows us to actually view the block of reality, even if we're always traveling kind of the same part of it,
Mm-hmm.
in different lights and from different perspectives, maybe even with slightly altered senses, like we were talking about superpowers and creativity.
Yeah.
And if I saw the world through Lonnie's eyes, even if we were looking at exactly the same thing, I would be seeing something different. So there's some room in there for, it's not necessarily in what I'm thinking about free will, or there might be some will involved, but definitely a capacity to experience differences in a world of sameness. And this story, the Superman story, it's really interesting that way. I mean, it's just a story. It is, goofy as heck, where we start off with this gigantic planet-sized living creature that this astronomer is worried about, and it sort of sends the story in a completely different direction, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
you don't see that much in comics now. And but when he gets to Krypton, he makes a mental note that like, oh, wow, this girl that I like, her initials are LL. I guess that's just fate, right?
Yeah.
So he's having this experience that in some ways is on par with the types of adventures that he could have on Earth, except it's on Krypton, etc. But then he ends up going back to Earth, and it's so random. It's just like it's this accident basically gets him back to completely absurd circumstances, gets him back to Earth. And we get to have a sort of, what was it, 1990s movie, Sliding Doors,
Would things be different if you caught the train instead of missing it? How much would your life change?
Oh, yeah,
Sliding
yeah.
Doors moment of like, okay, what life could have been if, Superman had been different. And so, yeah, it simultaneously implies that you can't escape fate, and it implies that you can have a very rich experience within the bounds of what we can't escape.
I mean, theoretically, that story could have always, like, he could have always been there in the past because nothing changed, you know?
Well, I think about it would, if you had the ability to just go back in time at will, it becomes less like a time than just a place, because those people are never dead. You
Mm-hmm.
can always go back and see them.
Yeah.
So it seems like there would, maybe you'd have to go in different disguises every time, but he'd be able to see his parents whenever he wanted to. He could see that woman whenever he wanted to. He wouldn't necessarily be able to. What are you doing with your hand there, Stefano?
I'm scrolling through See, my name is covering up my hands, and so I didn't realize that it was visible on the screen. All right, you can edit that out, or whatever.
I think it's funny.
I was scrolling through the page looking for Superman embracing. I noticed
Embracing.
there's one page where it's like just the whole page is Superman and the actress.
Here's something I want to point out, and I don't know if it was intentional. On this panel, on this page at the top right, there's Lila in the background and Superman in the foreground.
Yeah.
And then a couple pages later, look, now it's his mom.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah.
And I wonder
Yeah.
if that was an intentional Oedipal thing at all, or if it's just laziness.
It's a good question.
His mom's a hottie.
Yeah, I know. It was just, I was wondering whether the writer was going to go there or not, and I was thankful that they didn't.
So the first time he kisses her is right in front of his parents.
That's true.
That's weird. I would feel weird about that.
Yes, that's a good point. I like way to actually really inhabit the story.
No, it was as far as those panels that are almost identical, except for the switch from the actress to Superman's mother. There was a page in the first issue of that book, Kafka, where I had repeated, a framing, and there was one page where there was a lot of repetition, basically. And I was working probably about as fast as Wayne Boring was working here. So I don't remember actually making a conscious decision like, okay, I want people to have this feeling, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody wrote a letter, fan letter thing about it. And I mentioned that particular page and said, oh, I really like how, I forget if I was signing Steve or Stefano at the time, did this page and how he used this particular framing to convey this type of thing. When I read that, I was pleased. I was like, yeah, okay, that does work well. I was trying to figure out to what degree, while I was working, I had made an intentional choice, and to what degree I was just looking for the easiest way to convey something. And but the critique that came back to me felt valid to me. I mean, the positive comment felt valid. It's like, yeah, something worked there, right? And I didn't dwell on whether it was my subconscious or my conscious or lucky or whatever. For me, it's just part and parcel of drawing. There are some things that are going to happen as a result of your intention, some things that are going to happen because of your subconscious instincts, your whatever it is. There's so many different things that I don't distinguish much. Whereas Steve Siegel, who is generally a more grounded person, he thought it was funny because I think he knew that I was working so fast that, from just knowing me, it's not like I talked to him about my intellectual, explanation of why I do this or why I do that. And so he just thought it was funny the way that an audience can see things in a work and maybe attribute it to the artist's intent when it's not there. It's like I think about that whenever, like this, every time you look at artwork and you make, have a thought like that, I've heard a lot. It's like, did the artist mean to do that? Did the artist not mean to do that? It kind of works on some level. And I would doubt that Wayne Boring, in the process of working, actually thought, oh, I want to do this thing. I want to have this kind of subconscious juxtaposition or whatever. But since there's a little bit of that energy in that story anyway, it makes sense that it wasn't a mistake, even if it wasn't intentional,
I had something that I noticed actually just today. This story has only one panel with no words at all.
Interesting.
And it's this one right here.
Yeah.
Of her crying.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I kind of wish there was one of Superman. Editor's note. I am wrong. There are actually two wordless panels in this story. This is the other one.
That's unusual for them. Stefano, you were talking about earlier with like subconscious and conscious intent in creation. My comics, they're not superhero. They're, kind of slice of life stuff. And this one, this one is a good one for me to talk about because it's almost like that dressed up with superheroes in a way.
Yeah.
And for there's a lot of intentionality of like sometimes of silent panels for that kind of a focus and intensity to emotion that you have and everything. So yeah, I love it.
I'm assuming that it was pretty uncommon at that time to have silent panel in comic books. Do you know Scorpio?
I don't feel like it is. They usually fill those suckers with word balloons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, usually there weren't many silent panels.
Yeah,
You
so
can find them here and there,
Okay.
but this, there's so much lettering on each panel in this story.
Yeah. And I can't imagine Stan Lee leaving a silent panel without a comment saying, I decided not to put a caption on here.
As a creator, you guys know that's like, especially if you load up panels that are verbose, that like that kind of, you hit that silent beat, it's more intense,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was disappointed though by the last panel.
Yeah, it seems so ho hum, didn't it?
Yeah, he's like, oh, it's already fading. The whole memory of it's fading. It's good to be back on Earth
Yeah,
with my friends.
yeah.
I don't know. I kind of liked that actually. Yeah. I thought,
You liked it?
I did because it felt, it was, I took it and, again, I don't know whether Jerry Siegel intended this or not. But I took it as an almost philosophical statement about how no matter how intensely we feel something, it'll fade in the background. And, when we grieve, we get over it. And it's just like, I thought it was a good reminder rather than going in the Stan Lee direction, which would have been like, oh my God, this now,
Yeah,
it's
some
like
big,
such
some big
a
soliloquy.
heavy thing. He was just like, all right, it's fading. I guess that's how it's going. And it wasn't like he didn't care. It wasn't like it was all trivial to him. But I think definitely it would have been reassuring for the kids, the 12-year-olds that were the target audience.
Good point. Yeah,
Kind
yeah.
of know that Superman was going to bounce back from this. It's like, it's all right. The love of your life now died with your parents, and you have one more person to grieve in Krypton, and but you know what? It's not going to haunt me for the rest of my life because that's not the kind of character I am. Leave that to Batman. I'm Superman, solar, and I thought it was a good message for, reassuring the kids. And also, I mean, we're all getting older. We're seeing people die. We're dealing with aging parents or parents that are gone, and we've all been through important relationships with people, that like end, and then it's like, I mean, you can fall in love when you're young, maybe when you're old, and be like, okay, yeah, right, this is it, and then it's just like when it ends, it's crushing, and then another relationship comes along. It felt very real to me, and I liked it. I think it's not a bad attitude to have. It didn't feel trivial. It didn't feel superficial. It felt profound. So I like that.
So contrast that to the Superman movie when Lois Lane dies. And Superman.
Oh yeah.
That's what spurs Superman to turn back time.
Right, which is actually, that's super interesting. The way that yeah. Which actually is where I didn't grow up with a Superman movie. I only saw it in the late 70s when I was on a flight, and they were, it was like these old flights. It was like, TWA or whatever, where they had one screen for the whole airplane, basically. And I could barely speak English, so I just couldn't get engaged in the story. But I remember I was kind of following it. And when that happened, it kind of lost me. I was like, come on, Like, if someone can do that, then all stories are meaningless, basically, right? Whereas I actually need to rewatch that movie because I know that it's for a lot of people, it's the best Superman movie and kind of a great movie in and of itself, and obviously it had really good people involved. How did you guys feel? I mean, didn't that seem just like too much, like a throwback to 1950s comic books or whatever?
I loved it as a kid, and I'm not sure how much. It was more about Superman's releasing his anguish and his emotions for me than the actual turning back time. But as a kid, when that was on HBO, before I had a VCR, I had just an audio recorder, and I recorded. I don't know if I recorded the entire movie, but I had that scene on my on a tape player, and I would just play it back over and over again.
Wow.
Him going, you know, it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know if it was just the sound of it that I thought just sounded really cool, or if it was me responding to not being able to release some emotions. And I'm talking like I'm 7 or 8 years old here.
Right.
I just remember lying on the bottom bunk of my bunk bed, just listening to it, and I would replay it over and over and over again. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, it's like the sound definitely is relatable. You know, it's just one of those things where it's like, and you know, it's like it conveys that desperation with all of the emotions. You know, the intensity of you know, near rage, whatever. And I think, you know, the powerlessness of kids often leads to that kind of, you know, unhappiness, if you want to call it that. So I'm not surprised that that it had, you know, that it was something that you would go back to. What about you, Lonnie? What did you have any? Did you watch the movie as a kid or at any point? And what was your reaction to the going back in time to save Lois Lane in the movie?
Oh, I want to repeat the bridge from the comic in contrast to the movie. I was gonna say, so I think, you know, I'm pretty skeptical person and pretty grounded. And like the thing that I was talking about earlier about my theory of time, one of the reasons sometimes I think this is it's happened. This is probably the wackiest thing that I will probably ever say. But there's been times in my life where I have dreamed, I feel like with certainty, the future, you know, and then when it occurs, you know, at that time in my present, you know, there's a strong sense of deja vu, and it's nothing sweeping, it's nothing grandiose, it's often banal, you know, it's like something like, oh my gosh, I've never been to this house before, but I've dreamt of this space, or like some, like, you know, a way someone offers me, you know, hot tea on a saucer, and just like that interaction and that person, I was like, oh my gosh, I've dreamt that before. And so that goes back to the you know, the comic, the whole idea of like being really loving that idea of just like our brain just can't see the fullness of time, you know. You can only see backwards. But if we had a if we had a higher consciousness, maybe we could, you know. And I feel like maybe those moments I glimpsed that, you know, just for like seconds. And so yeah, that comic, yeah, it was a great recommend, Scorpio. And to the point, I kind of agree with Scorpio on like it was a little too abrupt for me, but I like your interpretation of it, Stefano, because you know, right now, like dating and stuff like that, and you know, I have like life goals and plans and everything, and I'm trying to stick to those because of what I'm prioritizing in my life. And sometimes with some of these romantic interests, I have a good time, and I'm so like, you know, so enthralled in it. And then for practical reasons, that's all, you know, the time that we have is all the time we got. And like, I have to be okay with that. So it's very zen, you know, it's appreciating, it's like savoring the moments that we do have, and understanding those are gifts, you know. But I do kind of sense that Siegel probably could have used more pages for a softer landing.
He would have had to remove some kissing panels.
Right. Yeah, no, and I'm not for that. So bridge that to the movie though, real quick, is that I'm like you, I did see it like as a kid, but yeah, that scene in the movie did bug me. Just on like even when I was younger, I get kind of into the weeds of like like the technicality of time travel, because
How
it's
does it work? Yeah.
contradictory, and yeah, first of all, it did throw off, even as a kid, my suspension of disbelief that he's turning back time. But also I was like, well, then if he went there to save Lois, then wouldn't the other missile blow up the other place? Like, I didn't understand the mechanics of what was happening. And like I said, this doesn't fit into my favorite type of kind of looped systematic time travel idea either.
Like, I think a lot of people think, oh, he's turning the world back on its axis. Like, no, he's not literally turning the world backwards. My view of it is it's like the wagon wheel effect when you watch a TV show or a movie, where hubcaps, they look like they're spinning backwards due to the frame rate of the camera.
So what happened to the other missile?
Yeah, it doesn't all. That could have been off camera. We didn't see it. It doesn't necessarily work.
For those who don't know, the plot is that Lex Luthor's plan is to send two missiles so that Superman couldn't be two places at once. Superman is trapped with a kryptonite necklace. This girl releases him, and she made him promise before she released him from the kryptonite chain to go to stop the one in Hackensack, New Jersey, because her mother lives there. And Superman, being a good person who always keeps his word, went to save that one, but as a result, he was too late to save Lois Lane from the other missile.
Yeah. Even if there's a hole there the other missile and everything, I don't have a problem with the idea of seeing the Earth going backwards. Like, even as a kid, I never literally thought the Earth was spinning backwards on its axis, which I think a lot of people think that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I interpret it.
That it was the actual axis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good workaround, but yeah.
I mean, I just think that from an outside observer, like, that's a way of conveying that we are the watchers, and like we are like the Marvel watchers. We're watching everything happen, and maybe it would look like that to us.
I guess for me, the time travel problem, other than the mechanics of it, which are there, if you're going to go back to change one thing, where do you stop? It changes the nature of our existence to the point that it makes our existence not necessarily lose meaning, but it makes me lose an understanding of what the parameters of existence are. Like right now, I have deadlines. I have, I need to sleep and eat. I have responsibilities, people, that I care about, people that depend on me, so on and so forth, right? If I could go back in time and change things, my whole focus would have to change. I would need to try to do kind of like what cats do when they go into a new house and they go into every room and check out the whole thing, right? I would need to get an understanding of how far in time I can go, how many places I can go, who can I interact with, and all of that stuff. And to not do that would feel pretty hugely irresponsible, right? So I know that that's taking it way too seriously, but it's, it becomes a story about Superman and Lois Lane, which is probably kind of what the movie wanted to do. It's like, oh, he really does love her so much that he would do anything to save her. And then, kind of going with what happens to the other missile. Never mind everything else. The thing that matters is that he's got Lois, right? Yeah, it's an interesting thing. This takes me to For the Man Who Has Everything, which is the other homework assignment that you gave us, Scorpio. Overlapping themes. Scorpio, you mentioned that you think Alan Moore was somehow riffing off of number 141 when he did For the Man Who Has Everything.
Yeah, Lila's in it. He's married to her.
She's in it. Yeah, For the Man Who Has Everything, spoiler warning, Superman is basically tricked into being possessed by this alien creature thing that allows him to live out what the creature presumes might be Superman's most fond, unfulfilled wish. And we see Superman living a normal life in Krypton. Krypton hasn't exploded, and he's got a job, he's got a beautiful wife. It's a woman that we saw in 141. And throughout that story, we get this message that Superman is aware that something feels off. He starts questioning whether he really loves his children or whether this is all just in his imagination. He questions the reality of this experience that he's having, in spite of the fact that he has profound feelings for his wife and children. What happens on Krypton in this imaginary, fiction that Superman is exposed to is very interesting in itself. There's political commentary, just really, it's a good story. But at the heart of it, there's, a lot of messages that you can get out of it. One of it is because of how difficult, particularly the political situation gets on Krypton, it kind of begs a question of, do you really want your fondest wish to become true? Like, we see that if Krypton had not exploded, it would have run into a series of problems that maybe would have made life miserable on Krypton or something like that, which is kind of a variation on you can't escape fate, like something bad is going to happen down the line. But this idea that Superman couldn't just like go with it, it's almost like the opposite of that abrupt ending in number 141, where Superman just accepts it. He's just like, okay, well, wow, that was kind of amazing. I actually went back in time. I didn't dream this. I went back in time and I got married or, had this relationship and I got to meet my mom and dad. But then now I've lost that again. And I guess that's all right. That's a kind of accept what you can't change sort of attitude. Going back in time and saying Lois Lane is not accepting that you can't change something, finding a way to change that, and with a very specific focus. But for a man who has everything, it's almost like this insistence that the true life is the one that Superman has on that earth where Wonder Woman, Batman, and Robin are going to the Fortress of Solitude to celebrate his birthday, and they find him in the grip of this alien hallucination. Batman and Robin succeed in ripping that creature off of Superman, which snaps Superman out of it, and the story goes from there basically towards the ending. Well, if Batman and Robin hadn't removed that creature, Superman would have continued to live his life in this different reality. He might have felt weird about it. He might have felt good about it. But I'm just curious to see what you guys think. Just like, I think it's interesting stories. It's interesting thoughts. Somewhere in there, there's an attitude that is more of an attitude of acceptance or less of an attitude of acceptance. And I guess some of what is told in the stories is that it's up to us. We have some control over how we react to what's around us. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I didn't reread the assignment. I was telling Scorpio.
Oh.
So but here's the thing. I was telling Scorpio before this, that comic like profoundly affected me before I even paid attention to credits. I had no idea until later, being more familiar with Alan Moore. That is like, I'm getting rid of most of my comic collection to try to be more Zen-like, and that one is not one that's going away because it so profoundly affected me. I pretty much have that story memorized. And I was just talking to my son who visited me earlier, and I was saying that was such a joy because they adapted the story to one of the Justice League cartoon episodes.
Oh.
And when he watched it, seeing him affected by the same story, I was like, that was so cool. And then I would later tell him some of the other things that Alan Moore did, and my son was funny. He was like, "Oh man, that guy just makes bangers." And I was like, yeah. As an indie guy, it's just like Alan Moore still is just like so good. But to loop back what you were saying, Scorpio, about playing the recording of Superman, like screaming and stuff like that. I mean, I remember so many lines in there where they finally get that thing off of him, and the rage that Superman felt of like, you have no idea what you took from me. So, I mean, to counter that, apparently whatever he felt in that imaginary universe was so intense for him because he lost all of his family in, just by being brought awake in there, and the rage that he felt toward Mongol, in that moment was like, oh man, that was like, that was emotionally impactful for me. The other one that was funny was like where he also assumed that Wonder Woman was Superman's mate because she was powerful. I was like, oh, that's funny.
I reread it yesterday, and I hadn't read it in a long time apparently because there was a lot. I generally remembered it, but I didn't remember the fine details. And one thing I noticed is that there's never really a moment in the story where all is just perfectly well. You get the idea that yes, this is where he wants to be, but he's fighting his greatest desire all the time, which is probably his normal state as Superman. Because so because nothing worked. His dad's not there for him.
And I was going to say to you that Alan Moore, definitely, I can see the reference. And plus, I know for a fact that Alan Moore, he had Kurt Swan, draw his, whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. He was a huge Silver Age Superman, comics fan. So, yeah, I think I've done that in interviews and stuff. So definitely, I think it was referenced.
Yeah. But back to 141, something I noticed is that I had just read the book by Richard Matheson, Bid Time Return, which was made into a movie called Somewhere in Time. It came out in 1980, and it stars Christopher Reeve. He falls in love with a dead actress, and he wills himself back into the past through hypnotizing himself. That's the time travel device. They have a very brief, intense romance. And then at the end,
spoiler warning,
he makes a mistake, and then he gets thrust back into the present. So he loses his famous actress lost love, but he does not get over it. But I thought it was funny that, it's Christopher Reeve, Superman.
That was another movie that that also we had talked about previously on a different occasion that was so emotionally resonant for me. I think I just watched it on TV. I think it was like playing HBO or whatever those channels were when I was a little kid. And I watched it several times, and it was like very emotionally impactful for me. Yeah, it's almost one that like I like the memory of how intense the emotion is for me that I don't want to ever see it again because like as an adult, I will probably be way too critical of it. And similar to Superman in that last panel, like I want that feeling.
Right.
I had from that movie instead of, even though it was melancholic, that intense feeling instead of my adult brain, especially as a creator, to deconstruct it or anything,
That director, Jeannot Swark, ended up directing the Supergirl movie,
which I also liked
a few years later. And then
I know that's considered a bad movie, but I liked it too.
I never saw it all the way through.
Oh, okay.
But then that same director also directed some DC Comics TV shows later on too.
Oh, that's cool. Well, Helen Slater, I know for a while she had a prominent guest spot in the Supergirl TV, the more recent Girl TV series.
Cool.
And she played Superman's mom, Laura, on Smallville.
Wow.
My dad thought there was like a Scholastic thing where you could order. I don't know if for those who are familiar, but like back in the day, the schools had the Scholastic thing. You could order different things, and I ordered a Supergirl poster.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and my dad thought I was gay because I had this like Supergirl poster on my wall.
I mean,
it was Helen Slater. It was like a movie adaptation poster.
Why a Superman poster be more gay? I don't know.
Yeah, like why are you gay if you have the female?
I guess her costume wasn't skimpy enough.
Well, I think it was because like there's an idolatry of like womanness, right? I mean, in retrospect, it's very indicative, but like, I think to a red-blooded American dude down in Texas, that's weird. Right? Instead of having like trucks or like, I don't know, like, more manly things.
Better to be in love with trucks.
Right.
I had an X-Men women poster on my wall as a kid by Carl Potts, which featured Rogue and Storm and Kitty Pryde, and I loved it.
Cool.
But I also ended up having posters of, remember Samantha Fox?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Samantha Fox poster and a Vanna White, 2 Vanna White posters.
2 Vanna White posters, wow. Oh boy, youth. That's good.
Then I had a bunch of Iron Maiden posters on the wall too.
balance things out. Sure. No, that all goes well together. It's good. Does anyone else have any threads of thought? Because I was going to jump to a related topic, but
Jump to the related topic. We can come back.
I've been thinking as I read these stories, and I didn't know that Jerry Siegel was actually the writer of 141. It kind of makes sense from what little I know of his writing. But when I was starting out, I was, just right at the outset of the black and white boom in the 80s. My first self-published work with, Kirk and Frank from the sort of fandom group in Denver was an anthology, black and white, that came out basically at the same time as Teenage Mutant Turtles, right? I'm kind of a little bit haunted by the fact that after our first issue came out, and so we were on the stands as a publisher, we sold very little, but we had nationwide distribution, through a number of different distributors at the time. We got a letter from Jerry Siegel, and it was a submission letter. So Jerry Siegel, in 1984, when he would have been in his 70s, was trying to get work from kids publishing a black and white magazine in Colorado, right? And there's no way that it feels right that the man who created or co-created Superman would be looking for any work at that age. Like what feels right is that he would be just in a really great, comfortable space where he can do what he wants, he can write, he can not write, whatever he wants. Jerry Siegel can have it. He should have a good life. As long as he's not hurting anybody, we love the fact that this guy's doing well in this imaginary reality that wasn't actual reality.
FYI, I have that comic.
Oh, hey, cool, thank you.
I mean,
he created Superman. I mean, Jerry Siegel, you have the comic. So you know how weird it is. How weird is it? Like, in retrospect, we should have robbed the bank, come up with $2,000, and paid Jerry Siegel to give us whatever story he'd written. We don't care, right? But we sent him a letter that's like, apologizing for the fact that we don't have a budget and we can't afford to hire anybody. It's ridiculous. I mean, like, you've seen the comic book, Crimson Bridge #1. It's just like the fact that Jerry Siegel would send us a request for work, a submission letter. It's insane, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still doing, the DIY, like, kind of indie comic thing. But when I was first got in the scene in Denver, I picked that up, and you remember Team Motley. I was like, I flipped through it and I hit that page and I was like, wait, is this like, are you guys doing a parody? And so sorry, go ahead, but I was just flabbergasted.
So where that gets me is there's a reality that we would like better than the reality that we live in, where the person, Jerry Siegel, who created Superman, which is, I mean, it's insane, like the impact that this character has had on the whole world is massive. It's incalculable. It's one of the biggest impact that a creator can hope to have with something that they came up with, basically, right? And granted, some of the credit can be shared not only, of course, with Schuster, but with every artist and editor that, and like whatever. But right from the beginning, Superman made a splash. I mean, from the moment, like the first incarnation of Superman, the Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster incarnation, had a big enough impact that they already had television serials as soon as there was television. They had radio shows, they had the whole thing. So Jerry Siegel deserves credit for Superman 100%, right? Having a life where he struggles because people that could be classified as villains essentially did not properly reward them for what he gave them, right? Great. Now, the same Jerry Siegel in 1960 or whenever number 141 was put out, writes a story in which Superman gets to go back in time. It's not an imaginary story. He actually has his life. He loses it, and then he gets over it in 2 panels, basically. He's like, oh, you know what? It's fading already. I can go on. And I got to say, like, that just, like, not to defend how abrupt it was, because, that probably was a space thing, but it just, like, I find that comforting. It's not giving too much importance to how it feels to be on Earth, living the life we live as human beings. It's basically, it makes me think that Jerry Siegel, on some level, understood what is done is what is done. And whatever rewards he may or may not get for what he got had relevance to what he's doing in 1984, you know, but that is not all that important ultimately, right? It's just like, according to the story that he wrote, he has a sense of how everything is transitory anyway, and we're just going to do the best we can in the moment, you know. Whereas Alan Moore, who I love, I mean, I think he's an amazing writer, but Alan Moore is focusing more on this more, if you will, I think of it as a Batman-like thing, where it's like, this isn't right, and I have to fix it, right? Whereas Superman, when he's fixing problems, there's more of a lightness to it. It's like, this is what I can do. There's probably a lot of stuff that I can't do, but he's already like, in some ways, it kind of makes sense. What he lost in the whole Superman mythos is something that he never knew. He was a baby, he was put in a rocket, and he knows that there's a life that he could have had, but he doesn't remember his parents. That's tragic in and of itself, but he's rolling with it. He's like, I'm not going to obsess over this. I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to do what good I can do in the world. And I'm not going to stress about whether everything is perfect, basically. He's just doing the best he can. And I hope that, you know, that gave not Steve Siegel, Harry Siegel, some comfort.
Stefano, that's so awesome. I didn't realize your take on that. But here's a couple things that I do know. What you're saying is that, you know, when the Superman movie came out, it took Neil, you know, the late Neil Adams, to advocate for them, because they were both having medical problems, to advocate for them to receive royalties, you know, because they signed away their rights. And those things are hard because they definitely deserve, you know, they got scammed. I've thought about this before, but at the same time, without the machine of, you know, of the publisher, would Superman have been continued to be in our consciousness up to the latest like blockbuster movie, right? But yeah, they were so unassuming, so humble, as you were saying, just kind of like, you know, I knew it took Neil Adams to advocate, because they didn't do it well for themselves, even though I'm sure they were bitter about some of it. And I had recently listened to Alan Moore on a podcast, and he talked about um, one of the reasons he washed his hands of the comics industry for the most part was because he felt there was such a contradiction that the characters that many of these people worked in, he talked about how they were always ones to stand up for, you know, the underserved, the, you know, unjust. They always stood up for justice and to do the right thing and everything. And he said, yet, you know, when it came to pay disparities and creator rights and all of that, they were all cowards. That was only like a power fantasy, but they didn't want to exemplify those qualities in real life, in their day-to-day life. And so that parallel you just made, right? It just fits perfectly with like what you said, who they are, which is, I mean, that's what art is, especially if you're the storyteller. Um, they brought themselves to each of those stories. So
yeah, yeah, that's super interesting. Actually, you're right. It's just that a capacity for acceptance that can almost get in the way of your potential for agency, for actually doing something. And the superhero tends to be a figure that does things, which may not be the case again for the creators. That is really interesting. I mean, the stories do a pretty good job pointing to that pivot point between acceptance and rejection. You know, it just, I mean, he's rolling with it. When he's back in Krypton, he's not thinking much about, oh shit, you know, I got a deadline for the Daily Planet. I got to write that article that I promised to Perry White or whatever, right? He has a spot that was just a beautiful little note where he's thinking, wow, it's kind of cool that, like, you know, Lois loves me as Superman, but this, you know, glamorous actress loves me as myself because I don't have superpowers here. You know, he actually, it's pretty interesting, and it does show a stance towards the world that is more appreciative of what's there than concerned about injustices and, just making everything right.
I don't know if you've ever read some of those Golden Age
Oh
Superman.
God, I read the first issue of Superman where he's actually sort of socialist, anti-capitalist, kind
Oh
of like
yeah,
this
no,
guy.
he's like a
Yeah.
socialist hooligan.
It's interesting because there's something about a younger person is more likely to be more rebellious, right?
Yeah.
And a
Yes.
person that's middle-aged is more likely to be like, okay, there's a Talking Heads song, "This is not my beautiful house, this is not my beautiful wife."
I was
You can
thinking
find
of that
yourself in the
song. I was thinking of that
exactly
song earlier.
right,
Yeah.
and it just it's once in a lifetime. It's a great album, by the way, but that song is written from that pivot point that I think Superman is in the Alan Moore story, where it's like, I don't recognize myself in this. Something feels off, right? If you go into middle age, more often than not, you're going to mellow out a little bit and stress a little bit less about the things that you cannot, that you feel like you haven't been able to change. It's just like your window of opportunity, my window of opportunity is getting smaller and smaller, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm young, I think I've got X amount of energy and X amount of time in front of me. I might be able to do something like, what Neil Adams did, stand up for creator rights or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. When you're old, just realistically, you're thinking, I don't have as much time, I don't have as much energy. Even if I have the same ideals, which is not a given, I'm not going to be as fiery about them. It was kind of a revelation, what you were saying, Lonnie. When I read those early Superman stories, it was like, wow. And I mean, historically, it was at a time when socialism had not been fully demonized by mainstream United States culture,
Right.
But after World War II, it's not just that the people that held power didn't like the idea of socialism. Socialism was efficiently demonized and turned into something that
because of Russia becoming basically our bad for a time.
And so it's good stuff. I mean, like that's the beauty of art. It at least brings things to the surface that we can ponder or just enjoy without I mean, it's like with the time travel thing. I think it's great that like as a kid, Scorpio, you were able to just really see yourself in Superman, refusing to accept that loss.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a very emotional, I guess, direct, instinctive communication that the movie puts out. But then there's all the thinking that we can do, like, wait a second, what happened to the other missile and all of that stuff. It's all good.
And Alan Moore still refuses to accept his loss, right? I mean,
definitely. Alan Moore is more of a cranky old man. And you mentioned that, I think, I guess apparently he addressed it directly, where it's like, these people are not living in accordance with this ideal of standing up for justice, basically. And I love Alan Moore, and I think that, he has a right to be a cranky old man, absolutely. Just like I wouldn't say that...
I mean, I have respect for it. I don't know if I could turn down millions of dollars and be like, have my name removed from any adaptation, of my work. I mean, that is sticking to your guns, especially when it comes down to like millions of dollars, right? That you are that you're just brushing away.
That's a position that you take partially because for whatever reason, you're not trapped in this thought of, well, I could do a lot more good in the world if I had those millions of dollars. I could then blah, 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 right? He doesn't have that kind of mission, and he's satisfied with his life as it is, doesn't need the luxury upgrade, doesn't see himself as somebody that would use the money to do something that he believes is worthwhile. And so it's a sacrifice, but it's not as big of a sacrifice as it would be if you had a vision of yourself as somebody that either deserves to have a yacht or can do amazing things with the wealth that he would have.
Or even just the fame. I mean, he's already pretty famous, but I mean, like if his name were attached to those things and stuff like that, it would be even more famous. He could possibly have been a household name,
He can still pretty much do what he wants if he so chooses to. Like I know he did, He did one of those Avatar comics just because he had a big tax bill. So he said,
I didn't know that. Okay.
there are times when he needs to pay some bills, he can just go, hey, I'm going to do a comic. And
yeah, that's true.
So he probably gets by pretty well, you know, even just not being, who knows like how much money he has. It's not our business anyway. But it's like when you're a politician, you're getting by on power and your name and your fame. I would imagine. I don't know for sure.
What I think is, reliable information is that he either owns his apartment, very likely, or he can afford to pay rent in it and they're not going to drive him out of it. So he's got secure housing that is comfortable and adequate for him. He's in a relationship with Melinda Gabby that has its own parameters that both of them seem to have accepted, and he seems to be satisfied with that report. So he lives in his hometown, and I remember reading one of the introductions that he wrote for V for Vendetta, maybe when it went to DC, I can't remember. Back in the late 80s, he wrote something about how he was really disenchanted with Great Britain and was envisioning himself probably leaving and maybe moving to the United States, right? But he didn't. And presumably that's because a few things fell into place along the lines of what might have been like, well, the United States are no better than Great Britain, if I'm upset about the politics. There's something to be said for this idea that then he kind of formalized with big numbers of Northampton being the center of the universe and saying wherever you are is the center of the universe, right? You've run into that thing that Delamore has talked about.
One of the comments that I received most frequently upon the publication of the book Voice of the Fire that I wrote about Northampton was an accusation of exaggeration, placing too much importance upon a town whose only real relevance would seem to be to me. I had people who were saying, yes, but you could say this about any town, which is actually rather the point. If you can look beneath the surface, beneath the flagstones of Northampton, and find something magical, something wonderful, then yes, of course, that means that wherever you are, you could do the same excavation. You could find the meaning of the place in which you will probably be spending a great deal of your life.
And it comes to one great statement, which for me is a key statement to the understanding of myth and symbols. He says, I saw myself on the central mountain of the world, the highest place. And I had a vision because I was seeing in a sacred manner of the world. And the sacred central mountain was Harney Peak in South Dakota. And then he says, but the central mountain is everywhere. That is a real mythological realization.
Why?
It distinguishes between the local cult image, Harney Peak, and its connotation, the center of the world. The center of the world is the hub of the universe, axis mundi, the central point, pole star around which all revolves. The central point of the world is the point where stillness and movement are together. Movement is time, stillness is eternity, realizing the relationship of the temporal moment to the eternal, not moment, but forever, is the sense of life. Realizing how this moment in your life is actually a moment of eternity, and the experience of the eternal aspect of what you're doing in the temporal experience is the mythological experience, and he had it. So is the central mountain of the world Jerusalem, Rome, Benares, Lhasa,
Northampton,
Mexico City?
Northampton.
Mexico City, Jerusalem is symbolic of a spiritual principle as the center of the world.
and his interest in magic, I mean, basically he settled into, I think that what is reliably, accurate, as far as we can tell, is that he made a choice to settle in a place where he accepts that he can be as useful and as comfortable as he needs to be as a human being. And really, I mean, in the United States, there's a pretty big fixation on having wealth that would let you not only live a life that you're satisfied with, but do anything that can be imagined. It's like that idea of like, I may want to do this, so even if I have 3 houses, I need to have enough money so that if I want to buy a 4th house, I can do that, or something like that. Just like
it's almost an addiction.
What's that?
It's almost like an addiction.
Well, yeah, it can be an addiction. I think that there's an idea of not wanting to limit our potential in the United States.
That we can be self-creating.
Yeah, self-creating. So the pursuit of wealth is like, there's no limit, because once you've taken care of yourself and of your family, if you can envision what else you could do, you can think, well, yeah, but I want to make sure that like future generations are okay too. You can really expand so much beyond what is actually pertinent to our span of life on Earth, basically. And growing up in Europe, Italy coming out of Italy not having been a world power since the year 400, basically. It was just, there's much more of what I imagine is maybe Alan Moore's experience of life now, which is like, you have what you have, and as long as you're eating, as long as you have shelter, as long as your family is not suffering unduly in a way that could easily be prevented by, say, public health care, which we have. It's like healthcare, education, housing, food. That's about it. A little bit of free time,
It's also what you were saying about that Superman story. It's also enjoying, savoring those moments, because, you're saying like we're chasing, the West chases so much of that cycle of wanting more and more. It's probably no coincidence. We have all this technology. We have the high, our standard of living increases all the time, and yet highest rates of like anxiety and depression.
Oh yeah, suicide, suicide here and all of that, and it's so yeah. I think that makes me value the more accepting, easygoing sort of Superman number 41 attitude a little more than for the man who has everything, in the sense that aside from what the individual creators actually are doing with their lives and we're doing with their lives and all that stuff, yeah, it's two different attitudes towards life. And first, in my experience, I myself feel a great degree of dissatisfaction, right? I think that I could use more of that Jerry Siegel energy of just accepting things that I can't change. Like I'm relatively satisfied with my life, but I'm worried about social issues, just like all of this stuff.
I was going to say real quick, Scorpio, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast, you guys. And as you know, like Superman is my favorite thing, superhero, so I could talk about him all day, all the time. And for me, I was telling Scorpio this, it's being an immigrant in this country. Of course I saw the parallels. I was adopted from Korea. My adopted dad was like, this small town white guy. I was raised to believe in the American ideals, which, are really horrifying right now. I was just telling Scorpio too, there's Superman issue 300 is really kind of cool. It's also like kind of similar to those Silver Age comics. It's kind of an Elseworld story. And in it, instead of, when he was sent to Earth, he was sent to Earth in like 1976, February 29th, which is actually that year was a leap year. And I was born in 1976, and I was born March 1st. And so instead of like being down to Smallville, it's like the U.S. and Russia are involved in, you know, the Cold War, and so they both try to reach this spaceship, and instead he gets adopted by a military dad who's like my father and stuff like that. So I was always like, that issue was always like very weird for me, you know.
Wow. Wow.
Well, The Man Who Has Everything takes place on the 29th as well.
Does it? I wonder if that's
Well, yeah, I mean that's Superman's, that's his like canonical birthday.
Oh,
because it only comes around.
There you go.
Because it comes around only once every 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I barely missed his birthday then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a different universe, it would have been that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's that whole story, that side story where he's looking in on Smallville.
Yeah.
When his
yeah, we've got to mention that.
Yeah, with Pa and Ma.
Yeah,
Ma,
she was the hottie, wasn't she?
Yeah, she's super hot.
Yeah.
Wait. Did I miss that one? What was that story?
Oh, you missed that part?
Is it in 141?
Yeah. You know, it's very Back to the Future-y, where Superman has to make sure he gets his Earth parents together. And it's just this side story.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You can write Robert Zemeckis and ask him. There's not time travel in the actual story of Oedipus, but there's always like some this story and of course Back to the Future always like with time travel has some Oedipal stuff in it.
Okay, so that's great. There's a panel of a story where Martha actually reveals that she was only talking with the wannabe guy, the banker dude, to make Jonathan jealous, right?
Yeah.
And Superman is actually, in the next panel, says, I forgot that fate can't be changed, and Jonathan and Martha would have married anyway, and the law would have caught Snark anyway, too. So it's interesting. It just, there is that fatalism, the sense of there's nothing I can really do to keep Krypton from exploding. By the same token, even if I don't intervene in Smallville, Ma and Pa Kent are going to get married. It's interesting. Yeah, it's fatalism, basically. It's more of an old world mentality. It really is.
Yeah, then Superman says, I've lost her just when I'd resigned myself to perishing on Krypton with Lila and my parents. This had to happen due to a strange twist of fate. And also, I was just thinking, there's a line at the end of Oedipus Rex where Oedipus says, I would not have been saved from death if not for some strange evil fate. Well, let my fate go where it will.
Yeah, it just, that's just the way things are.
Then there was even another accidental edible element added to this story when in number 156, 15 issues later, Superman is reminiscing about this story. And when he's thinking about Lila, there she is, looking like his mom.
Yeah.
And maybe Lois and his mom are mixed together in his head and heart, too. And get this, Lois even has a thing for Superman's dad.
Wow.
And Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, number 59. Lois even travels back in time to Krypton to try and save it from exploding with the plans of an Earth professor's new anti-nuclear tower, just as Kal-El worked alongside Jor-El in Superman number 141 to create his space ark. Lois helps Jor-El translate the plans for the tower from English into Kryptonese. And here we go.
Wow.
Lois making out with Superman's dad. Making his mom jealous. And there's other similarities too to 141. In Superman 141, they build a space ark, which gets taken away when Brainiac shrinks Kandor. The exact same thing happens in the Lois Lane comic to the anti-nuclear tower.
That's right. Yeah.
But then it dawns on Lois that if she doesn't return to present-day Earth, she's going to die with the rest of Krypton. But before she heads back to the future, she jumps forward just a couple of years so she can shower baby Kal-El with some kisses. Something that Superman wouldn't let her do normally. And at the end, she realizes, like in Superman number 141, you just can't change fate. And if she had and become Jor-El's wife instead of Lara, she'd have been the mother of Superman, her object of desire.
Really?
Nice.
But back to Lila Laurel. After Superman number 141, her next appearance was in number 146 in the story Superman's Greatest Feats, which has Superman going into the past again, this time at the urging of his one-time girlfriend, mermaid Lori Lamaris. Lori asked him to travel millions of years into the past to save Atlantis from sinking, which, to Superman's surprise, he does. Then he travels to ancient Rome to save the Christians from being killed by lions. Next, he saves Revolutionary War hero Nathan Hale from execution by a British firing squad by taking his place. And then he saves Custer's army at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Then, of course, is the ubiquitous saving of Abraham Lincoln from assassination. So now that he's on a roll, Superman thinks, well, maybe I can save Krypton after all. So he builds a fleet of spaceships to be space arcs to carry the entire population of Krypton to Earth. And when the space fleet lands on Earth, it's Lila. It's Lila. And he's thinking about her. But,
As you do sometimes.
But he's not. He's just kind of doing it in that detached. Yeah, I was in love with her once. I don't really feel that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So he's shocked to see her. He reminisces about her, but the appearance of him as a baby pushes all thoughts of her from his mind. He doesn't actually meet Lila again. He doesn't say anything to her. She looks like she recognizes him based on her body language.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's like going, her hands are up in the air. Like it looks like she's asking him to kiss her. She doesn't just look excited. She's like, oh, there's a flying man. She just really looks like she wants him, right?
Yeah.
We will never know, probably, why she's drawn that way. But being the conscientious person Superman is, he is just more concerned that I can't possibly exist in two bodies, both as a child and as an adult, at the same time. It's contrary to all laws of science. Something is very, very wrong. At this point, Stefano had to take a break for a few minutes, so it'll just be Lonnie and Scorpio. But have no fear, Stefano will be back very soon. So, Superman 146, did you like it?
I like, well, sort of. I mean, I like their solution to it because, he is going back and changing all these things, going back to the time travel thing of like, my favorite of it's always meant to be as it will be. And like he's gone back and he changes all of those. And then I was like, whoa, how are they gonna, because spoilers for anyone. One of them is like he saves Lincoln from being assassinated, right? And then you're like, that would really seriously probably change history. That would be a major effect on history and create a different world for us. And so yeah, their solution was like, oh, it just created, an alternate timeline where all these events happen differently. Also, in the modern take, I actually looked this up later. I was like, oh, this is interesting that he tries to save Custer. And I was like, actually, I don't think I know. And I did a quick Wikipedia read of like, what exactly is that situation? And of course, it's actually complicated, right? Like all things when you do a deep dive, the Lakota invaded, I guess, these other tribes, which they asked the U.S. military to come in and help to stop them. But the reason they were invading them is because they were displaced by the U.S. government, in the first place. So, yeah.
I just my whole life I pretty much sided with the Lakota though.
Yeah.
Because I saw Little Big Man as a kid, so that became what happened, in my head.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it's of its time, right? And it's very like, and it's not like they were doing a deep dive in history anyways. They were taking like a headline, historical headline, basically. But I thought that part was striking. I was like, "Whoa, okay, we're gonna save Custer
Yeah.
as one of
Well,
the important things to stop in history."
Well, I thought it was funny that the story is basically driven by Lori Lamaris. He's gonna try to
Yeah, yeah. She was like, "Why don't you go back in time and save it?" Yeah, right, right.
So he saves Atlantis, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go back and just start changing things here and there and everywhere."
Right.
And it's all working out. And then he saves the Kryptonians by he builds that fleet of ships.
Yeah. To tie it back to the Superman movie, wouldn't have that been a hilarious ending after he saves Lois? When he goes back in time, he just like starts fixing all of history at the end of the movie.
And then he goes back and he saves Lois. And then he goes, oh, then he goes back and he saves other things.
Right.
Changes, make other changes. Then he goes back to Lois. Now Lois doesn't even exist anymore.
Right.
So
Right.
he has to keep going back. And
Right.
it's just like this ball of twine. He keeps ball of yarn. He's unraveling.
Yeah.
Well, actually, a tangled ball of yarn is my analogy for DC continuity.
Oh yeah, yeah. Honestly, ball of yarn is probably not a bad analogy just for like the concept of time, right? And how those different things are intertwined.
And there's the first story in 146, which is just the story of his life retold yet again. The story of Superman's life is the first time Martha's maiden name is referred to as Clark, Martha Clark, which contradicts 5 issues before.
Yeah, with the 141.
141 when she's Martha Hudson. But there's a letter in number 148 which says, Dear Editor, I enjoyed your excellent story, The Story of Superman's Life, in the July issue. But on page 6, Martha Kent states, I'll use my former name before our marriage, Clark. Yet in the story Superman's Return to Krypton, published last year, Jor-El says that he is observing Jonathan Kent and Martha Hudson, which is right. In other words, before Martha married, was her name Martha Clark or Martha Hudson? Paul Gambaccini, Westport, Connecticut. And the editor says, both versions are correct. Martha's maiden name was Martha Hudson Clark. Lack of space in the older story prevented us from being able to print her full name. That's such a Weasley bullshit. And get this, the writer of that letter, Paul Gambaccini, became a prominent BBC broadcaster.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wikipedia says, Paul Matthew Gambaccini is an American-British radio and television presenter and author. He is a dual citizen of the United States and United Kingdom, having become a British citizen in 2005. Known as the Great Gambo and the Professor of Pop, Gambaccini was a BBC Radio 1 presenter for 16 years, including 11 years on a weekly TV show counting down the Billboard Top 30 songs. Gambaccini was active in the realm of comic book fandom. As an American teenager in the 1960s, his missives were regularly published in the letter columns. Gambaccini claims to have invented the term Brand Ec, which later became widely used by Stan Lee. While still in high school, Gambaccini began contributing to comics fanzines, such as the Rockets Blast and the Comic Collector. In 1964, he succeeded Jerry Bales, the so-called father of comic book fandom, as executive secretary of the Academy of Comic Book Fans and Collectors. Blah, 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 blah. I went off on a tangent. This podcast is not about Paul Gambaccini. How did I even get here? Anyway, let's go back and talk about Lila Laryl and all her other appearances, which aren't that many. In this story, Lois uses a Kryptonian device to allow her to access the memory of Jor-El and Lara's courtship. She sees Lila kissing Jor-El on the cheek and presenting him with a medal, and Lara gets angry. But here's the thing. The story turns out to just be a dream. So you have Lois dreaming about Lila Laryl. So you have to wonder if Superman told Lois about Lila Laryl, which would have made her jealous. So why didn't we see that story? Then Superman number 158, we see Lila in a flashback. Here she has a diadem on her forehead.
As you do.
Yeah. In Superman's Girlfriend, number 97, Kal-El apparently meets Lila Laryl again, but it turns out she is just an imposter, one of the shape-shifting Durlin women trying to put one over on old Kal-El. Now I want to go back to Martha Hudson Clark for a moment. Here's why. Her birthday and my birthday are the same.
Happy birthday, Marta!
Okay, so that's great. There's a panel of a story where Martha actually reveals that she was only talking with the wannabe guy, the banker dude,
To make
Jonathan jealous. That's just the way things are.
Side note, my first girlfriend was one day in elementary school, and the girl, she was just talking to me to get the attention of another dude to make him jealous. I was that dude. It scarred me for life, and I still remember. And she was just telling me that calmly, and I still remember it like it was.
That's a harsh lesson,
I was unlocking my bike chain, getting my bike ready to go home when she's telling me this stuff. And the dude's name was Denver.
Oh,
What? What was the guy's name?
Denver.
I missed that. Like somehow, I'm not getting.
No, not in the comic. Not in the comic. The other kid in my class who this girl was trying to get the attention of, his name was Denver. Denver.
Okay.
Like the city.
That's solid. But there you go.
He was a Jehovah's Witness. Every time a substitute came to class, he would get in trouble right away because we'd have to say the Pledge of Allegiance. He would just sit here like this because as Jehovah's Witness, you don't.
Yeah, right.
And he would always have to explain. I felt bad for him because he always had to explain why he didn't salute the flag and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
Side note.
But I wouldn't call that getting in trouble. I mean, it's just.
Well.
Yeah.
It's momentarily in trouble. Imagine always having to explain yourself while you're doing things.
I'm familiar with that. And I always thought there was something weird about the Pledge of Allegiance. And as soon as I just kind of had a chance to process it, I stopped reciting it. It's weird now when I look at it, decades after I've gone to school, to see, oh yeah, there was a problem with that, and we're living it now.
Did either one of you, both of you have kids? Did either of your kids have to pledge allegiance to the flag?
My recollection is that they still did it. My recollection is that it was still done, even in liberal Seattle. Yeah, it's weird. But anyway, so that's pretty funny. Denver, the Jehovah's Witness, who wouldn't recite the Pledge of Allegiance, was apparently much admired. What's that?
I still like part of the Pledge of Allegiance,
Let's
Truth
go
and
through
justice
it.
for all.
Yeah.
That sounds great. We should try that.
Yeah.
It's a symbol.
Yeah. Apropos for Superman, right?
And then there's that whole kerfuffle about when he stopped saying in the American way.
We're excited to announce that to better reflect the storylines that we're telling across DC and to honor Superman's incredible legacy of over 80 years of building a better world, Superman's motto is evolving. Superman has long been a symbol of hope who inspires people, and it is that optimism and hope that powers him forward with this new mission statement: truth, justice, and a better tomorrow.
Yeah. It's we're having issues.
I'm not a big fan of the Man of Steel Superman, but I also have a theory that Superman seems to shine brightly in popular media, I think, whenever we're going through a rough time, nationally, politically. And, that starts with kind of his inception and World War II and, Jewish concentration camps and the Holocaust, right? And, during the first Superman movie, there was some pretty big upheavals with the Cold War and all of that. And this latest Superman movie, I think I've heard so many people who are not even like comic book fans who went to go see that movie and was like, oh man, that just felt good with all the news that's going on,
Mm-hmm.
And it is to see. And it's funny because the right media, they're also like, they're always looking for stuff to complain about, but they, complaining that he's woke and
Yeah.
all this other stuff. And it's like, what did you think he was? Like,
Yeah.
he has always been. That's his inception. That is what a superhero kind of is.
Yeah, and I mean, even when he stopped beating up, slumlords and stuff like that.
Actually, he beat up the slums themselves.
He always had a kindness to him that, is anti-fascist essentially in nature. So there's, even if he became more of his nationalist icon, he was always woke on some level.
It should never matter what a person is, Protestant, Jew, or Catholic. Nor should it matter what the color of a person's skin is or where his parents were born. That's what Brotherhood Week is all about. Let's practice it 52 weeks a year.
And I think that that's been part of his success, just globally, just presents the best, really the ideal land of the free stuff.
It's a journey and a fantasy for someone who's good, right? Someone who's
right.
Right.
It's something to legitimately aspire to. There's a modesty to him that really offsets his incredible powers. Before we get to sidetracked or the time ends, I was curious, Lonnie, where is your work right now? Where do we find it?
I'm using Instagram for most of them because that seems
so
to be.
So you're on Instagram and you have a website. If I do a search for Lonnie Allen, I would probably, it would lead to your website. Great.
Yeah,
excellent.
Yeah. They're on a website. I haven't caught up on my Patreon for it yet. Yeah, it was funny. I just went out last night and I told the woman later that she could Google me.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, "Oh no, I trust you. I'm not gonna try to dig up dirt." And I was like, "No, it's a flex."
Yeah, I was actually told the other night, before I had my date the other night, with the woman who ran for Senate. She was glad to be able to Google me because she's so used to being the only one with because there's so much information with someone who's running for Senate that she was just glad to have more than just a LinkedIn for me.
Yeah, it's good to have a presence out there.
The one thing that's great in this world, you can put out art into the world so easily. That's that was always the promise of the internet.
Yeah, and to that, it has come through. It's just like in the United States, you can't really make a living on what Marvel and DC Comics are paying right now. But first of all, that means that there's people in other countries that are now making a living through Marvel and DC because what Marvel and DC pays is actually enough to make ends meet comfortably enough in a lot of other places. So all power to them. And then, although it's harder to have that kind of job as a cartoonist, like you were saying, right now, if you have something that you want to put, in visual form, you have a forum that you can put it on that's basically free, which is wonderful.
Yeah, there's even a lower point of entry. Like I said, I grew up, I was making comics in the early 90s. So there was the idea of that DIY 80s that I still carry, I was trying to, when I was a young man, trying to decide what to do in school, I ended up just doing writing, but with the idea that I would writing and art, with the idea that I would make comics over film. I love film. But the thing that I love, similar to a novelist, right, is the great thing about a comic is really, what do you need? You need a paper and a drawing utensil. And there is a beauty in that, right? There's there's not a high production value there.
It's easier than painting, definitely easier than sculpture, architecture, dance, theater, any of the above,
And I love all those things. I'm not throwing shade on any of those.
No, absolutely. But you're right. It's kind of amazing how much you can do with so little. It's just because obviously, outside of comics, you can draw, you can do whatever, but it's just to be able to tell a story without relying on a whole team of people on production and the distribution system.
And that's it. Our time is up.
All right. Well, it was great seeing you both.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you both.
Thank you for having me. Hey, have a safe trip back, friend, and let me know when you arrive home.
I know this is coming from a white woman and all, But your idea of leaving this country isn't right. This is your country as much as any white person's, and if everyone like you leaves, what is left here? This is your home too. And I don't know all the struggles of an artist, so if you change careers like you want, I can't really speak to that, except don't stop making art, for yourself at least. You have a great artistic voice, and you're a really great cartoonist, Lonnie.
She didn't say anything about my attractiveness. Did the strip come out after the comic, or do you know which one came out first?
Superman 141 hit stands September 15th, 1960, and the newspaper strip, it started just over a month before.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it started on August 13th, 1960, but it was still going after the comic came out.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the elements were introduced first, and others were introduced after the comic.
There's probably no way to know, especially something so esoteric, but they might have gotten the script at the same time, the different artists, right?
Yeah, if Wayne Boring had the benefit of seeing what Kurt Swan had already drawn.
Mm-hmm.
But comparing the panels, they're not the same.
It
looks like they follow the same structure, like probably the same camera direction in the script, but drew differently.
Much more of a fan of Kurt Swan, and it's still, for me, very apparent when I look at the paper strip compared to the comic book. I love his staging so much more, and his rendering a lot better, and everything. It still had that same abrupt ending.
Yep.
But I mean, I don't know. I don't have both of them in front of me. Otherwise, I could kind of do panel by some of the panels that I think are striking. One of the ones is the planet that he chases in the beginning.
Yeah.
Looks clear to me, Wayne Boring. It's more cartoonish. And then, I don't know, the Kurt Swan looks more conceptual. So the planet that he initially chases off to travel back in time. And then I'm also curious too, knowing that the strips are going to be in black and white, as opposed to being colored. I wonder if that makes the inker and the penciler approach the compositions different, right? Because you can leave things a lot less rendered because it's going to be filled in by color, kind of, That would be my thinking a little bit, and as opposed to if all it's going to be is black and white, you're thinking about the textures and light dark balance a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Well, I noticed there's some panels where the yellow of Superman's shield on his chest is just the color of his leotard. Basically dark blue or black or whatever you want to imagine it is in black and white.
I also wonder if doing it were those dailies or weeklies? The newspaper strips. Dailies. Wow.
Yeah, there was a newspaper. There was a Sunday, and I'm not sure who was doing the Sunday.
Even still, though, for a monthly, they were knocking out a page a day back then, right? Probably on average.
Oh, more than that, probably.
Yeah. So I guess actually daily, doing 3 or 4 panels, probably gave Kurt Swan a lot more time too, in Wayne Boring's defense. But it's funny. It's the same story, but I do definitely significantly like the strips better. And it's interesting because lately, I've been working in strips too. So there's a certain breathing room for time, and also just like letting a story decompress, I feel like, a little bit.
Well, the book, the collection that comes in, the Superman Dailies book, says that there are 100 extra panels in the story.
Oh, wow.
So some of the panels that were, all the text was in one panel.
Uh-huh.
The comic was split into two.
Okay.
So yeah, breathing room, decompressed. I gotta say, I like the comic book version in color better, and I generally like Kurt Swan better
Mm-hmm.
in comics, but Superman had less expression, showed less emotion than Swan's later comics.
Okay.
And apparently this was actually Swan's last newspaper strip of Superman.
Oh, cool.
It was his swan song.
Yeah. Right.
He had drawn it since June 18th, 1956. So he'd done it for 4 years.
This is the first time I've read those two, like, comparatively, you know?
Apparently Swan's first Superman comic was way back in number 51.
The Man Who Bossed Superman.
Which was in late 40s, early 50s, something like that. You can't even tell that it's his art. It's in that Joe Shuster style. So one thing I liked about the comic book better is that there's more kissing. There's almost twice as many panels kissing in the comic book. And I think the color of the comic conveys a lot more passion and romance.
Mm-hmm.
This is it for Kurt Swan's newspaper strip. There's comparison of their first kiss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jor-El and they're both on the same side of the panel and everything.
Yeah, and I just feel like compositionally, the Kurt Swan is just more interesting, you know, with the foreground is more distinctive. And of course, like I was saying, you know, knowing that it's going to be color, you know, even the background for the hint of the room and stuff like that with the blacks there.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Yeah.
And he's bent over.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's got her more in a swoon.
Mm-hmm.
She's swooning more. Well, although she kind of passed out, so he's lower.
Mm-hmm.
This was an added panel. Just there's an added daydreaming panel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of torn on these two. I like both. Superman he definitely looks more concentrating. Like he's trying to concentrate in the Wayne Boring comic book version. Versus He really looks like he's just unable to work in the comic strip version. And he's closing his eyes, just thinking about it. I can't drive that girl out of my mind. There's Super Mope right there.
Mm-hmm.
There, I think that panel looks like she's like sculpting him. He looks like a sculpture more than a real person. But look how sad he looks in that second panel there.
Well, this is a sad situation.
Oh, it is. Yeah. There's the final panel. Kind of like Wayne Boring's better.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because it's looking down on Metropolis. It's at an angle versus just being level with the buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I once again, I like the Kurt Swan more. There's a compositional balance that I like better, you know, with a thought balloon and his position in the city.
Where he looks like he's in the city versus
Mm-hmm.
kind of flying which way over it.
Yeah, which I think is a better transition for him to be back in Metropolis, you know?
It's true. Okay, so that's the newspaper strip.
But I never really ever want to throw shade to any of those guys because it's like thinking about the level of speed in which they were working and how much they put, you know. This is just a comparative thing just for my personal preference, but yeah. I mean, always hats off to all those guys, you know, during this, especially Silver Age. Whew.